here, and we'll just take it where it goes.
All right,
Okay.
let's do it.
So, hey everybody, it's Jody, and welcome to episode 62 of Circle Up and Get Real. I am so excited to be sharing with you a friend of mine, Chris Natzke, who I've gotten to know over the years. I've met you a couple times in person, Chris, but when I met you the first time, I just felt connected to you. And Chris is an author, a speaker, a coach, a martial artist. And I'm going to let Chris tell you more about his story and how he got here. But this is a really special day when we're recording this on February 25th, because Chris has just about a half hour ago become a best-selling author of his second book. And he'll tell us more about that, breaking through. And Chris, welcome to Circle Up and Get Real.
Thanks, Jody. It's just an absolute thrill to be here. Thank you.
Oh yeah. I don't know. I think you felt that way when you met me too. I think we both just kind of connected, and I can't explain that really. That happens occasionally for me. But when I heard you speak, I met you in Denver a couple of years ago at a Gary Barnes event. We can talk more about what that is. But there was just something about you, your spirit, your energy, that connected with my soul.
Yeah. I feel exactly the same way, Jody. And in fact, it was interesting. I felt that way when we connected personally. And then I guess it was 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago at Connect, I got to listen to you speak. And I was like, oh my gosh, she's totally speaking my language. So it was totally right on that level. And it's always fun. There's those few opportunities that we get to connect with people like that. And it's what's so fun is when you meet someone like we had that connection. It's like we've known each other forever, right? And we had just, we've only met physically a couple times. So really, really honored to have that experience.
Oh, thank you. And I feel the same way. And Chris and I exchanged books. And so we had the opportunity to get to know each other even better through our writing. And I have to show this. If you're listening to this podcast later, you're not seeing the video of this, but I have my board right here, Chris, that I broke
There it
through
is. There it is.
when I met you. So I broke through from the things I didn't want to the things I did want. And I still have the board. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Chris helps you break through, literally, physically break through a board with your hand so that you can experience what it's like to break through. So that was really special, Chris. And I felt so empowered when I did that. So how, I don't even really know where to start, Chris, because there's so much you could share, but I always like to know from the people I get to know. Today on February 25th, 2021, you're in Denver, the Denver area. How did you get there? Not physically, but what was your story? Like, who were you when you were a kid, and how did you get where you are today?
Right, right. Well, thanks for asking. It's kind of fun to think about that far back. Martial arts has really been an incredibly impactful part of my life for my entire life since I was 10 years old. And you may have heard me tell this story when I speak, but I got interested in the martial arts back in the early 70s because there was a TV show at the time called Kung Fu.
Yeah.
And back in the day, martial arts wasn't known the way it is today. But I just felt this connection and I just begged my mom. I grew up in a little town in Wisconsin, and it's not like it is today where you have martial arts school on every corner. And I went there in the community center and I saw these people doing these movements and I was like, I'm home. I just felt it. And it just continued from there. And then I had a person who's still very near and dear to my heart, my martial arts instructor. When I was 13, he moved from Korea and I got to meet him and he became this amazing pillar in my life. Growing up, had my mother and father both in my life, but my father struggled with alcoholism. And so there was a void of that positive male role model. And my instructor filled that role for me in such a beautiful and elegant way. And interestingly enough, he, having just come from Korea the way he did, his English at age 35, 36 was very poor, but I could always understand him. Every time he spoke, I'd look at people and they had these, what is he talking about? Look on their face. And he and I had this connection. And he's my, he calls me his Taekwondo son and I'm his, and he's my Taekwondo father. And so that was just such an element of just wonderment in my life. And then from there went on, was an all-star football player in high school, went on to play at Northwestern University on a scholarship as a linebacker, and then went into the corporate world right out of college and thought that's where my career was going to be, but always had this burning desire to own a martial arts studio on my own.
Oh, wow.
And, and that, in fact, I literally have in my file right over my corner a an autobiography that I wrote when I was 11 years old. You know what a fifth grader would write?
Yeah.
You know, when I was 1 year old, I did this. When I was 2 years old, I did this. And it says in there, when I was 10 years old, I started Taekwondo. I am now a blue belt. And one day I want to open my own school.
Wow.
That's when I was 11 years old. So my then wife, my former spouse, who was just so incredibly supportive and just so instrumental, and I'm just so grateful. When we moved to Denver, because the company I was with would I get promoted and they would transfer me. She said, you know what? We love Denver. We had two boys, amazing young men together. She said, the boys love it here. I love it here. It's time for you to go for your dream. And so
Mm.
she totally supported me. And that school opened and it immediately took off. Within a year, I had 200 students. Within 5 years, 500 students. It was one of the largest schools in the country. And then had some life changes go on, as we all do. And my marriage dissolved, et cetera. Now I was looking for other things to do. And that's when I really started getting involved in speaking and coaching. And so I sold that school in 2013, but I'm still involved. My student now owns it, so I'm still very much involved in the school. So I get that little fix for me, and now I get to take those principles that I learned in martial art leadership and share them with a much broader audience. You know, I don't need to teach you to kick and punch for 10 years to get these lessons. You can, you know, everyone has access to now. So that's kind of how I got here. That's
Nice.
kind
Oh,
of
I love it. And I have witnessed it. I have seen you, and I have, like I said earlier, I've broken through a board. I've actually done some of the things physically that you teach, and I've also experienced you emotionally and spiritually, because there's a spiritual dimension to you that I know is there, and I'm wondering if that's always been there. Is that part of martial arts, or is
Well, you know, it's part of martial arts, yes. And I think that it's always been there in its innate way. And I think it's in all of us. I have to really get honest that I was I was very committed, particularly when I opened my martial arts school in 1995, of a lot of personal development. And then I went into a lot of spiritual work, et cetera. But it's like anything, those things that we learn them cognitively, but then we don't really learn them until we have to really rely on them. And when I went through a divorce and a major life change, now all of a sudden, you know, using principle, the law of attraction and everything, and my spirituality wasn't about just getting a parking spot when I needed one. And now it was about, I'm in really real pain here and I need to learn how to transcend this. That's when I needed the tools. And so all the martial arts stuff, and I went on in 2013 and graduated with a master's in spiritual psychology from the University of Santa Monica, which was a life-changing education. But I can almost guarantee you I wouldn't have gone down that path if I wouldn't have had this really epic event in my life that caused me to just shook me to a core. You know, and that's when we really learn, okay, yeah, you want to become more spiritual? Okay. Are you ready? Buckle up, baby. And that's what happened with me.
so spiritual psychology? I didn't even know there was such a thing. How did
Yeah,
you
yeah.
find that?
It's a beautiful program. I had a number of friends that live in the Denver area that went through this program. It's a 2 year program through the University of Santa Monica, and it's based on a heavy emphasis on compassionate self forgiveness. About looking at the root word of psychology is breath of spirit. So it
Mm.
wasn't all about cognitive behavior theories and everything. We've kind of made it that, but it's about getting to that essence of us. And it was a kind of a counseling program for ministers beforehand, although it's you know, it's not affiliated with any type of church or anything. But man, it just you would in that program, you're doing your work while you're learning to help others do their process. And so there's this wonderful learning while you're experiencing it. And it was totally life changing for me.
Oh, I can tell. I saw that in your bio, and I guess I didn't even remember that you had that master's degree, and that's really cool. And from there, I know spirituality and business to me have to go together, but in my experience of observation, they are completely separate. And so, how do you put those two things together when you're doing
Yeah.
your work?
Well, and I'll tell you what, I think that's a marvelous question and a marvelous observation. But I'll tell you what I've come to believe, and I can't speak to it from a standpoint of when I was doing corporate work because it was so long ago, right? Such a different person. But I think being an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, if you will, is the ultimate lesson in personal development and spiritual development if we choose, because there's nowhere to hide. We have to be authentic. And if we're not showing up as ourselves, everyone sees it. And if we have blockages, there are blockages that we have to own, because if we don't own, the business doesn't succeed. So it's like you have to move through that if you want to be successful. And that's just been my experience. The people that I've met that are generally the ones that I would say are the most successful. And that means they're they're being successful in their business venture as well as their personal ventures. They are doing their work. They have done their work. Otherwise, they wouldn't have. And they're also generous in helping others do that. That's been my experience.
Yeah.
They want nothing more than, hey, this is what I did. This is how I can show you to help. I mean, and I've just been so blessed in my life to have just person after person be there to help me.
So when you do your work, the personal work is one thing, and then doing your work to share the message, you work with individuals and organizations?
I do. So the speaking element of it, I do my keynote speaking. I do a lot on what I call developing the mind of a champion. I have a talk I'm doing now about moving through challenging times with power, passion, and purpose. In fact, I just had one of those today at 10 o'clock this morning. I was doing a virtual keynote. And then in my life coaching work, I call it life leadership coaching. I help people understand what are the key aspects of their life that they want to have that breakthrough in, what's the strategies they can develop, and then identifying what are some of the skill sets they need to develop, what are some of the mindset shifts. And then what happens is I become not their accountability coach, but their capability coach.
Mm.
And I love this distinction. I wrote about it in my latest book. It's my very, very good friend, Kellyanne Zelinsky of Self Leadership Global coined this phrase, and I use it all the time. When someone holds us accountable, it's about, okay, I said I was going to do this, and it can almost be condescending. I'm going to hold you accountable. Holding someone capable is like, wow, I see greatness in you.
Mm.
If you want to step into this, I'm here to support you, and I'm not going to let you be less than what you said you want to be.
I love that.
That's a whole different energy, isn't it?
It is totally, it's magnetic as opposed to dynamic.
Exactly.
Dynamic pushes and magnetic attracts.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
oh, I love that distinction. And you have, I don't, this isn't even a fair question. It's like asking which of your sons you like better. But what do you like better, working with individuals or working with organizations or
Well,
speak?
that is you are so right. It's like, who do I love more? Which son, right? It kind of depends on what I just got done doing. Like I just got done having a great keynote a couple hours ago. Man, I just want to do the next one. But I also love doing my work individually with one-on-one people. I think that at my essence, I'm a teacher. Okay, that's what I am. I'm a teacher. And whether if I'm on stage or if I'm, virtually doing it, I'm teaching principles and helping inspire people to enact those. And when I'm doing my coaching, I'm holding up a mirror, hopefully, so people can see where their areas of opportunity are, helping see their greatness, and then giving them some guidance on how they can really fulfill that. So I know that's not the answer you're probably looking for. It's like, take a try. It's difficult for me to do that. It's
Well, it's a
really
difficult, it was kind of a trick question because I
okay. Good, good.
so I want to ask you about COVID. I want to ask you about this last year. And you said you were just doing a virtual keynote. So how did that affect you in this last year?
Well, I'll tell you what. I actually was sharing this in the talk that I just gave. 2020 was starting out to be my best year in the speaking business. It was mid-February. I already had 13 talks either on the books or I had delivered. I had many more people reaching out, et cetera. And then all of a sudden, boom, it just stopped. And so many of the events I had booked, of course, they just went away as well. And in fact, I went from, I think, mid-February until Gary Barnes again asked me to come in Denver and do a live event in September, maybe. Or maybe I think I had one before that, but still, that's 7 months. So I was like, holy moly, what am I going to do with my time? So I had to start getting creative. I had another business venture that I had a 1-year agreement helping this company develop a product, and I was going to be a spokesperson for them. That just poof went away because their angel funding went away. What are you going to do? So I had to start pivoting. I had to look at doing a little more leaning into my coaching, which I did. Develop now a a virtual keynote and presentation. You've seen me in action. I tend to be a little physical on stage,
Very
right?
much.
Now, I that element wasn't there, and that was always that was the easy part for me, right? Because I've been doing it for so long. How do I get that same energy and that same content across differently? And then the book was part of it. I did some online programs, et cetera. So this is what I shared with the group this morning. The challenging times that we have are oftentimes the most difficult. In fact, I think for many people, the last 10 to 12 months has probably been some of the most challenging we faced. And in the seed, or in the very essence of that, at its very root, in the seeds of that, are our seeds of huge opportunity, right? And in fact, what I challenged the audience, I said, I want you to think back on the times in your life that you're probably most proud of. And you're not most proud of the time when you did something and everything was super easy and you got a result. Those aren't the things you talk about. The things you talk about is, man, I really struggled. It pushed me to the edge, but I got through. And so we have that opportunity now. I think that the worst mistake we can make is to be holding on for things to get back to normal,
Yeah, I agree.
because they may never get back to normal. But what can we do? What's this new thing we can create to get to this next level? And then look back a year from now, 3 years from now, and go, wow, I'm totally doing something I never thought possible, but it was because I couldn't do my old stuff back when COVID hit.
And I think about that on a spiritual level, a spiritual dimension. I had some kind of sense in February, March that this was going to be big. And I told myself, I don't want to waste this pandemic.
Yeah.
And there's got to be something on a higher level that needed to happen. When we saw at the beginning the water in the canals in Venice getting clearer, and the vibration of the earth slowing down, and we saw the skies getting clearer from the pollution, we couldn't continue the way we were going, because we were going to break. Something had to break, not in a breakthrough way, but in a breakdown way. And I don't know how I saw that, but I too had a pretty good year going. I had been to 2 events nationally, and again, same thing, slowed down. But I think, to your point about looking back in 2 or 3 or 5 years and saying, this was the most significant opportunity that was presented to me that I wouldn't have chosen.
Would not have chosen, right? And just, and I think I love the distinction you just made about breakthrough versus breakdown. But I think oftentimes the breakthroughs are preceded by the breakdowns. Just like when I was saying, I wouldn't have been on the path that I am today if I wouldn't have gone through what was for me an incredibly dramatic divorce.
Yeah.
That was incredibly dramatic. This was someone who I had been with since I was 16 years old. And now I'm 40 years old. And I'm like, wow, everything, all the things that I thought where my life was going to go, what I had worked all these years to create with someone, it wasn't there. And it's not a fault of anyone. It happened. It happened. And I look back at it now, and the person I am today, I'm so much more happy in many, many ways. And I'm so much glad I'm expressing the way I am versus who I was back then.
Yeah.
That I would have made the change.
And I think if we look at those walls or roadblocks or potholes or whatever you want to call them that are ahead of us, with the same vision that we had when we come around them, then we've missed the point. I mean, so I've heard it said, a setback is a setup for a comeback.
Yeah.
And you can't have a breakthrough if you don't have something to break through, right? I mean,
Right.
to your point of
Exactly.
breaking your hand through the board.
Totally. Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, life. I mean, it's not like we ever want those bad things to happen, right? Bad, quote unquote.
right.
But life would be pretty boring if everything was always working out the way we wanted to. And sometimes, how many times do we think, oh, we know exactly what we want? And it's like they say, when you make plans, God laughs, right? And we end up being in this whole different space that's so amazing.
Yeah.
So that's how I've kind of looked at this. And it's not to say that fear didn't show up. That's not to say that at all. There were some times like going, holy cow. And I'm here. You're here. We're all
So
here.
I love that you said that about fear, because I think people will say, be fearless. Don't let fear, let's look at fear for what it is. It's got a purpose. But let's not put the glasses of fear on so that we see everything through the lens of fear. Let's use fear as a signal and something to help keep us safe. I think you did the landmark forum, didn't you?
I did. I did.
So remember in the landmark forum, they taught us that there's only two kinds of fear, authentic and inauthentic. Authentic fear is any fear that threatens your physical survival. And that's to be respected. I mean,
Right.
if a bear is running after you in the woods, that's to be respected. But everything that doesn't threaten your physical survival is inauthentic, and it's something we've made up. And so if we can see fear that way, like you said, it shows up because it has a purpose. It has to do something for us.
Amen. Amen to that. It's so funny. I'm chuckling as you said that when you talk about the bear. The way that I use that example is when I was competing on a national level for Taekwondo. In 1999, I was the United States national champion. And I always tell people when you step into the ring and you have an opponent that's 6'6", 260, like I did in one of my matches, and it was full contact. So he's looking to knock me out. I'm not looking to knock him out. There's some fear. It doesn't matter how good you are.
Yeah.
There's fear.
Oh yeah.
But the other thing too is like we as human beings, we get caught up in a cycle of fear. Fear is healthy. Like you said, if you're going to get attacked, I've often heard it said, the difference between a human being and a dog is if a dog has someone mistreat them, right? An owner is bad to them, mistreats them, they'll go through it, but then they'll let it go. And if 5 years goes by and that man shows up again, the dog will start to grit its teeth because those memories will come back. The difference between the dog and the human is in those 5 years, the dog wasn't thinking every day about being mistreated by the human, but we do that. And the other thing I've heard is that when we have fear go through our body, the natural way for us to process it in our bodies, in our psyches, lasts about 16 seconds. Okay. That's the natural process for it to move through. If it lasts more than 16 seconds, it's because we're recycling it.
Wow.
Isn't that powerful?
Yeah.
Yeah, I always tell people, if you're scared, feel scared, don't suppress it, feel it, but then let it pass through you and then focus on what's really happening, not what your stories are being told in your mind.
Oh, for sure. That's so good. And for you to be able to say right now, one of the most painful things that happened in your life is something that caused you, not that, yeah, I didn't hear you say it was a good thing because it caused you to be a different person, but to see what was, and then to see how you've thrived beyond it. Otherwise, victim mentality can hold us back so much.
Man, I'll tell you, I have a good friend, Teresa Byrne, who makes the distinction about going from victim to victor to visionary. So victim, we go through our process, and then we're able to process through that, and we have the victory of being able to transcend it. But then the visionary is the one that can actually share from that experience and help others. It becomes a positive element in our life where we get to share from. And I've always loved that distinction she created.
Well, and I love that you've done that, because I was saying earlier about your book, the one book, you have two books, and the one just came out today. I did get it on Kindle and I'm on page 29. So I haven't quite gotten all the way through it yet.
Trust me, you're probably further than my kids are right now. So thank you.
It's really good, by the way. But I love the way in your first book, you really take a concept, you break it down into steps, and then you share your experience with it. So it doesn't feel theoretical. It feels like something you can do because I can do because you did it.
Right. Thank you. Well, and I've just really learned that one of the most impactful ways of teaching, speaking, whatever you want to call it, is through stories. Because we can talk about you can talk about the facts and the content, and the left side of the brain gets, we think about it, but it's the stories that resonate on the right side of the brain that hit us emotionally. And it also helps people, like if somebody, I'm reading right now, again, rereading Simon Sinek's book, The Power of Why. And he does this thing in what he calls the golden circle, right? And he says, most people are really good at telling you what they do and how they do it, but not why you do it. And my favorite quote of his is Martin Luther King in August of 1963 didn't get 250,000 people to congregate on the Mall of the United States to hear his I have a plan speech. It was the I have a dream speech, right? And that's one of the things I always am encouraging, not only myself, but the people I coach in audiences is, what's your why? What's your why? Why are you here? Why are you showing up today in this place? And what do you want to do with your life? What's your why? Because when you hit that, then you're unstoppable. And you can't, you can be stopped and detoured, whatever, but if you're constantly leaning into it, you're always going to be on the right path.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I think about that when you're saying it, I connect with your story about your why. I don't connect with your story about your how, because your how doesn't necessarily work for me if I haven't established my own why first.
Exactly. No doubt. No doubt. And I think that sometimes that's a really hard concept for people to delineate. Like, why am I here? You know, it's a big question. But what I always say to people is, and when I work with my clients and like, what's your why or what's your purpose? And I say, go through your life and look at all the times, all the way far back as you remember, grade school, kindergarten, preschool, all the way to present day, the times where you were totally feeling fulfilled and you were energized and you were just feeling at the top of your game. What were you doing and who were you serving? And that could come in all certain ways. And then draw the line through that. What's the thread? And the thread of that is most likely your purpose.
That's good.
So for me, it was about, every time I looked at that myself, it was about inspiring, leading, teaching, empowering others. That's what I did, whether it was in martial arts, whether it was in sports, whether it was being a parent, whether it was being in the business world. That's what got my juices flowing. And when I do that process with people, and I have a whole thing that I work them through, you can start to see the light bulbs go on. It's not, oh, I want to be an architect. That's not, no, your purpose really isn't what you do. It's who you show up as you're doing that. That's your purpose.
That's good. And that's such a huge distinction, because I mean, think when you're a little kid, they don't ask you what you want to do when you grow up. They ask you what you want to be when you grow up.
You grow up.
And
Exactly.
I think, have you ever heard that quote by, I think it was John Lennon, who some teacher asked him at one point what he wanted to be, and
What do you want to be? And he said, I want to be happy.
she said, I think you misunderstood. And he said, no, I think you misunderstood.
That's right.
And if we could just remember that, because little kids don't worry about how to pay the bills and all the things that we get into worry about. You write about that in your book, about worry, and how I think you had some statistics in there.
The statistics. In fact, I just shared them this morning with the group. Because when I read about this study that I'll share with you, was life-changing for me, because one of the defaults, and I think we learned them from our culture, and I learned it within my home. My parents were pretty good worriers, right? There was always this culture of worry inside. And so there was a study by a man named Dr. Robert Leahy. It's by a book of the same name called The Worry Cure. And what he did is he brought these subjects together and he said, I want you to write down in detail all of the things that you're worried about happening in your life in the next 30 days. So, what's going to go on in my profession and in my finances, my health and wellness, my relationship, everything you're worried about. And then he said, okay, thanks for the list. Go live your life for 30 days. Do your best not to make any major shifts and come back in about 32 or 33 days. So, of course, they did. And here's what they found. 85% of the things that they listed never happened. And as I joke, but there's many people who are listening to this podcast, Jody, that go, well, 15% did, right? Right? But here's where it gets super cool. Of the 15% that did, 79% of those things, people said it either happened and it wasn't as bad as they thought it would be, or B, it happened and they were happy and grateful for it because they learned from it. So when you distill that down to the next level, that means 97% of the things we worry about either never happened or we're actually happy they did. So what I always say to audiences is, how would you live your life differently if you knew that to be true? What risks would you take? What conversations would you have? What business ventures would you dive? What would you do if you knew that to be true?
Oh, that's so powerful. So I'm getting from this conversation that we as human beings, if we are held capable, not held accountable, is that what it was?
Held capable. Yep.
Held capable by ourselves and others around us, we can take some risks and do some things that will enhance our experience of living in a way that is very personal. And I want to talk about one that you did, the Camino. Could you talk about the Camino? And if you don't know what the Camino is, everybody, it's like this crazy 500-mile journey somewhere through Spain or something like that. Would you tell us about how you got to that point of doing it and then what that was like for you?
Yeah, it's a marvelous story in many ways. I had been exposed to the idea of doing the Camino probably 10 to 15 years before that. I'd received a book and I read it on vacation, and it was a book by Shirley MacLaine called The Camino. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And the Camino de Santiago is a 500-mile walk across northern Spain. Was initiated about 1,000 years ago by the church, almost it was done for penance, right? So people would go and they would go from. I started in Western France in a place called Saint Jean Pierre de Paul, and I went across up into the Pyrenees Mountains, and then you descend into Spain. And what you do is you go from village to village and stay in hostels. So it's not like, a 5-star hotel. I mean, some nights I was sleeping with 80 of my closest friends, right? Earplugs, snoring, whatever. But I went on it as a means of it was a pilgrimage for me. And that's what you're called as a pilgrim. But it was about a slowing down and deepening. And the way that I got there was pretty amazing. I had a friend who I was going out to lunch with in February of 2014. And he was proudly showing me his bucket list on his phone. And he, that year, actually climbed Kilimanjaro, and he had all these things he was going to do. And he said, well, what's on your bucket list? And I said, well, I don't know. And he goes, what about that walk you've always told me about? I said, oh, the Camino. Yeah, absolutely. He goes, why don't you do it? And I said, you know what, Stephen, one day I'm going to do it. He goes, this year. I'm like, oh, and I started making all the excuses. And great friend, he just wouldn't let me squirm out of that one. So I made a commitment to do some research with another friend who had done it right after that meeting. And one thing led to another, led to another, led to another. And May 4th, I was walking up the side of the Pyrenees.
Wow. From February to May.
From February to May. And all of a sudden, I remember starting going, I'm actually here. How did this happen?
Wow.
Everything. I had some financial difficulties I was going through at the time that got rectified right when I bought the ticket. I had all these things happening. And then finally I said, heck with it. I'm buying the ticket. And within 2 days, it was totally resolved.
Wow.
Better than I thought it was going to be. And so I walked then about 17, 18 miles a day. I started May 4th. I got into Santiago on June 1st, met people from all over the world, Canada, United States, Korea, bunch of Europeans, France, Australia, New Zealand, people from all over. And it was just this marvelous pilgrimage. And what's interesting is that they say the way you walk the Camino is how you walk life. Mm. And I had an instance that happened about halfway through. For the first 2 weeks, I basically was diving into it as an athletic event. I get up early in the morning before everyone else would do, and I loved walking early in the morning. And sometimes I'd walk 4 hours by 10 o'clock in the morning, right? And I was in a village one day and I caught something out of the corner of my eye, and I walked another 10 paces and I said, I need to go back there. So I walked back, and over the doorway, there was a sign that said refuge for the peregrinos, which is refuge for the pilgrims. And I began to walk inside, and then I stopped. And my monkey mind started, oh, it's probably a tourist trap and I won't get to my destination on time. So I backed out and I went on my way. The next day, I went into a restaurant, and there was a big table of a bunch of Americans and Canadians I'd met on the trail, and they saw me and they called me over. So I sit down at the head of the table and I order my meal. And the guy to my left is a guy from San Francisco, and he says, hey, why don't we all share our most empowering experiences so far on the Camino? He said, I'll start. Did anyone see the refuge of the peregrinos yesterday? He goes, I went in there. They gave me cookies. They played soft music. There was a fireplace. I read. It was 2 hours of absolute bliss. Well, I'm sitting at the head of the table. I know if some of your listeners can relate to this, but when I was growing up, the Flintstones were a cartoon, and when
Yeah.
Fred would get embarrassed, he'd shrink to like 2 inches. That's how I felt, right?
Oh.
And so I sheepishly raised my hand and I said, I told him the story. And I said, you know what? I'm, as a result of that, I am committing to slowing down.
Mm.
After that, I slowed down. I still started early, but I'd stop on the trail. I'd stop and eat lunch. I'd talk with people, and my whole experience transformed.
Wow.
So it was such a great metaphor for my life to slow down, Chris. Slow down. You're missing too much.
Do you remember that now, or was that enough to just have you now make that
It's
shift forever?
something that I have to practice,
Yeah.
but every time I feel where I'm getting overwhelmed, that instance comes back to me. It
Mm.
does. It
I
is there.
love that. Well,
Yeah.
that's what awareness is about, isn't it? Just getting more aware of everything that happens, not to us, but for us. And
Right.
when we can do that, I think the
And
experience of
that's just one example too. I mean, tons of stories came from that. I've often thought about, I mean, there are tons of books that people have written, but I have my own experiences that were just like life-changing, like, wow. And it's because, you slow down. We right now before COVID, we get in our car, we race to one destination, we go to the next. Uh, The first 6 weeks, I wasn't in a car.
yeah, yeah.
That's crazy, right?
I
It was,
just got my oil changed last week. I didn't get my oil changed for one whole year.
I have to do that next week too. It's so funny you said that. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm the same way. I'm the same way.
and yet you said this earlier, and yet here we are.
Here we are. Yeah, here we are.
Oh, it's so good. I know you and I could talk forever. I just feel like there's so much we could share because it just feels like we have come to this intersection several times. I mean, we haven't seen each other for a while in person, but I follow you and I think you follow me. And it's like, it's just souls that don't have to be in person to connect. And
And if I could, I think it's because there are people that we have that connection. It's because we're here on this planet at this time for a purpose too. We're really here to shine light. And when we meet other people that have that resonance and have that intention, and it may be in totally different lines of work and different ways of doing it, but we understand the essence of what each other one is doing. And it's like being a kindred soul. We there's that vibration you can feel. So
so true. And you said the being, because I know you have in your book the why be do and the be do have and all those kinds of things that we have talked about earlier with our landmark experience. But the being, I think that concept for me was really difficult because I was such a doer. I was an athlete as well, and I couldn't understand the grammar of it. How do you be? What do you mean? How do you be? That's not a verb. I don't understand. And so that concept was so difficult, but once it clicks, it makes so much sense that what you do comes from who you be. And you can do stuff, angrily and frustrated, and you're going to get a result. And earlier we were talking about sharing our why before the how. If I asked you how to do something and you told me how you did it, and I didn't connect with my own why before that, I could blame you for telling me to do something that didn't work for me. And I could say, well, that's what Chris told me. I wouldn't have done it that way, but that's what Chris said.
right. And we do that in our society, don't we?
We do.
Because we don't take accountability and responsibility for that. And the other thing that I would add to what you said, Jody, is this is going to sound like a cliche, but we are human beings. We're not human doings. And we forget that.
Yeah.
And particularly, and you and I can resonate with this being competitive athletes, right? It's all about action, and action's super, super important. And we got the success we had because we knew how to go out and perform, right? And then it works until it doesn't.
Mm-hmm. So true.
And then you have to go, okay, there must be a plan B or C or F here that I've got to look at, because I used to equate it to, hey, I think I used to play life like chess, where I was thinking and always in my head and thinking about this move, the next move. And then I turned around to grab something to drink, and I came back and someone had changed the game to checkers. Now it's the same game board. So I'm in my same life, but it's a much simpler game than it was before, but I'm still trying to play chess, but somebody changed the game to checkers.
That's really good. I love that. And what if the somebody who changed it to checkers knew better than I did? What what if there's a greater being out there that knows and has a plan for me, and I've been trying to figure it out and I don't have to. I can
Exactly.
allow and pay attention and follow the signals.
Oh, that's it. That's it.
Chris, will you tell us a little bit about your new book and where we can find it and how we can get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Yeah. The book is, and I know some of you are listening, but I'm holding this up here. It's called Breaking Through. And just to give a little context to the book, Jody has talked about it a couple of times. You experienced the board breaking experience with me. And in the board breaking experience, what I do is I help people identify the breakthrough they want in their life. And they literally write it on one side of a board. Jody was just showing me hers before we got on air. And then on the other side, I have them write down their limiting beliefs. And then I systematically, there it is. So I have confidence there. Yeah, that's what you want to, excuses, self-doubt, unworthiness, those were her limiting beliefs. So what I then have them do is I systematically teach them how to break that board after they've come up in front of the room and said, my name is Jody. This is my breakthrough. This is my limiting beliefs. So you're making this proclamation. And it's an empowering experience when you break that piece of wood, right? But I often thought, I run into people just like you did, Jody. I see them, oh my gosh, my board's still in my office, whatever. And I often wondered, but did they have the breakthrough? And not because they didn't want the breakthrough, but because maybe they didn't know where to start or didn't know how to do it. So that's how this book came about. These are three ideas, three major concepts that I use. And then each section has about 3 to 4 chapters about step by step how you go from creating your vision. That's the first one is clarifying your vision. And then you create your plan, and then you take consistent action. And so it's all those elements. So you can get it on Amazon. You can go directly to Amazon, or you can go to my website, chrisnatzke.com, ChrisNatzke.com. And right now through, I think it's Friday, you can download the ebook version for only 99 cents. So.
Well, that's not why I did it. I did it so I could get it fast, but I'll get an actual copy as well. But I'm looking at the e-version of it, and you've got lines like, with this being the case, we'll ask our first question, and you ask us to actually do the work, write your answer below. I'm not going to write on my iPad, but and it's a workbook.
Right.
And it actually has me do the work. And then I get to go on to identify my big why in chapter 2. So there's a lot of really great guided steps to getting whatever.
Yeah, and that was my intention. I didn't want it just to be theory. I think there's strategies in there. There are exercises, as you noted, and then there's also stories in there that are pretty inspiring. One of my favorite is the woman, I think I wrote about it in the forward, that I didn't know this going into the board breaking experience, but she had multiple sclerosis. And so she had tried to break the board, and I held the board for like 3 times. And now everyone in the room, 60 people have broken the board, and it's she and I. And she had bounced off that thing now another 3 times. And I could see that she was getting a little shaken. And I leaned over to her and I said, I'm going to be here all weekend at this conference. If you don't break it now, we'll just do it another day. It's okay. And she centered herself and she measured up, and all of a sudden, crack, she broke through. And the entire room stood up, spontaneous standing ovation. Tears are flowing down her face. She jumps in my arms. And those are the memories, right? And like we're going through challenging times now, but those are the things we're going to remember. And those are the things that are going to inspire others, is when we struggled, but we continued to do it, and we tapped into our highest and best self, and then we got the results that we did. So,
well, it is those things that seem to be hard or seem to be unbreakable for her, that you said it earlier, those are the things that we remember. Those are the times that we made it through. And on the other side of that is everything we've ever wanted and have become, so that when we actually become the person to whom the things we only want can't help but be attracted, that's how we break through to a whole other dimension.
And it's like they say, people on their deathbed don't tell the hospice workers, the regret they have for the things they did. their stories are for the things that they didn't do. That's where their regret lies.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So let's never have those kinds of regrets. Let's do stuff so we have regrets. Hey, I maybe
that's
shouldn't
right.
have
There you
done
go.
that, but at least I tried it, So
Right.
Chris, this is a pleasure. I can't even express my appreciation to you. And I'm grateful for your friendship and for your wisdom and sharing it with us. So please go get Chris's book, look him up. I'll make sure in the show notes we have all of your contact information. And thank you.
Thanks, my friend. It's been an absolute pleasure. What a great way. This has been a big day for me. This is like I couldn't think of a better way to kind of wrap it up. So thank you.
You're welcome. I was going to ask you a bunch of questions about yourself, but I think we're real. We're real enough. We don't have to know about your favorite candy.
I'll just tell you my favorite movie.
Yeah.
One question I think was about my favorite movie, right? That I've watched. It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, I love
And
that.
I've watched it probably more than 10 times and I still cry every time I watch it. And it's because life's pretty awesome. So,
Sure is. Another one, if you haven't seen it, Peaceful Warrior.
oh, that's probably number 2 on my list. And in fact, that was the first book, probably the first book that I read in spirituality. And about 4 or 5 years ago, when he came out with his third and final version of that series, I got to meet Dan Millman here in Denver, and I was like a kid in a candy store. I just like, oh, it's Dan Millman, right? Yeah, love that book.
So fun because you wonder what's true. I mean, how much of it and which part of it, like, did he jump on top of the roof or what? That's just so much fun. So, thank you, Chris. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm going to stop right there. This will be available, I hope, by my plan is by tomorrow. So
wow. Okay.
I'll work on it tonight and get it all.
Great. Yeah, let me know because then I'll share it. And what I'd love to do too is I think this one went really well. I have several podcast interviews that I have on my website.
Yeah.
So I'd love to be able to upload this as well and have it there, and
absolutely,
it helps you out as well. And if there's any other way that I can help you and your business, please let me know.
Yeah, I'm starting something with do you know Chris Angel?
No.
So he was in Master Networks for a while as well. That's where I first met him. I hired him as my marketing coach, and his marketing company is called My Groundswell. And so he and I are creating a new offering together called Vibe Masterminds, about keeping your frequency high and getting into mastermind groups with people who are studying and helping each other. And our goal is to impact 1 million people. 1,000 will have 1,000. And
wow. Well, as you roll that out and you need it to be, circulate or whatever, I'm there. I'd love to help you out.
I would love that. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. I'll make sure.
All right. We'll talk to you. Have a great rest of the day.
I will. You too. Bye-bye.